But what's really interesting about this is that there's been reports that it was an infamous UK drill rapper by the name of Broadday Ye who was actually charged with the murder, and he was serving time for another murder that he was convicted guilty on, of a man called Sven Badzak, who it's been reported that he was just an innocent man. It was a case of mistaken identity. And really just a very sad situation. There's been rumors that maybe the victim might have had something to do with what was going on in the streets, but he was jailed for this murder, and then he's ended up murdering Ian Watkins of the Lost Prophets. So, Chris, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, just as far as how does it come about that a notorious drill rapper who is been jailed for a pretty dark and just really heartbreaking murder of allegedly an aspiring lawyer who was an innocent man. How does he end up on the wing with someone like Ian Watkins? And how does the authorities allow, violence like this to pop off in there, and not be in a position to stop it?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I must say, firstly, I was really shocked when I heard over the weekend that Ian Watkins had been killed. Um, I mean, although I think his ex-girlfriend, Joanne Miazdelic, who has said she was surprised it didn't happen earlier,
Mm.
because obviously, low-life nonce would be the lowest of the low in the prison pecking order. And like you say, especially when they're mixing, because usually this sort of SA offenders, or PDF file, as they're known, or as we have to call them, are locked away separately and segregated away from the main prison population because they are so loathed. So it is odd that firstly that Broadway or Goodell was actually in the same prison and on the same wing as him. Apart from anything else, because usually London prisoners, somebody convicted who's got all their family in London would usually serve a sentence in the south of England, or at the very most the Midlands. They wouldn't usually be transferred to the north of England, so I'm not quite sure why he was there. But we will no doubt find out at the trial. But yeah, it sounds like Wakefield has got a particular problem with violence. It had a really bad prison inspection report, and this may be the culmination of that.
So you're quite familiar with how maybe some of these arrangements are made in prisons. You seem to know a decent amount about it. So you're saying that some of these guys that are convicted of some of these heinous crimes, crimes of a intimate nature and crimes against children and things like that, they're kind of separated, I guess, for their own protection from the other prisoners, because the jail knows that really. I don't know whether it's for infamy or just for personal reasons, but a lot of guys, they want to try and kill PDF files. They actually want to cause harm to these guys. So how does that work, as far as they're just kept completely separate for their own safety? Do they get their own section of the prison? Are they given extra protections by the guards? What should we have really expected to be happening? And clearly there's been a failure somewhere along the line, because that protection didn't protect Ian Watkins from losing his life. But what are some of the arrangements that can be made in prison to kind of protect some of these low lives, really?
Yeah, well, there is something called Rule 43, which is what they call that sort of prisoner who needs sort of special protection because they have committed a certain offence which is so horrendous. Wayne Couzens, who killed Sarah Everard, would probably be on Rule 43 because A, is a horrific crime, and B, was a police officer. Um, so it's not always PDF files that are on Rule 43. Sometimes it's people who, the prison grapevine says they're a grass, and they might need special protection. But they're usually on the same wing, away from sort of the rest of the prison population. It may be due to prison overcrowding that Wakefield has had to sort of bend that rule, has had to put non-Rule 43 prisoners in with Rule 43 prisoners, which has I've heard it said that apparently people doing, people sent to Wakefield had to sign some sort of disclaimer that they would not hurt or harm any of the you know the sex offenders, which is kind of bizarre that you're going to try to trust somebody to do that. But that may explain why these people are all in the same wing. And if that comes out at the trial, depending on the verdict, if they are convicted, and it turns out that that was the case, then the government, the Home Office, is going to have a lot of questions to answer.
So I've got an
Not that,
article
not that
here.
anyone's going to, cry too many tears about Ian Watkins or.
No, definitely not crying any tears. But I think I think in the UK there's just this unfortunate sense at the moment that just the justice system isn't as airtight as it should be. And realistically, I know a lot of people are upset that Ian Watkins might have had parole in 2031. It probably was unlikely that he would have been given parole. But I feel like there's a feeling that really it's not up to some inmate to take his life away and deliver, their own street justice. At the end of the day, this is somebody that should have been serving their time. He should have been, experiencing his prison time. And so I've pulled up an article here. It says increased violence at prison, a report finds. So this is a report about Wakefield Prison. It says the levels of violence have increased at a prison in West Yorkshire, and some inmates do not feel safe enough to leave their cells, according to inspectors. Representatives from His Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons, I guess it is His Majesty's Prison now. I didn't even think of that since we got the King now. Visited HMP Wakefield in June and July. They found there'd been a 62% rise in violent incidents and a 72% increase in serious assaults since the last inspection in 2022. And older inmates felt unsafe around a growing cohort of younger prisoners. A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said that the government was investing 40 million nationally in security enhancements at prisons, introducing a violence reduction unit. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like 40 million nationally, that's not really going to do much, is it? I mean, what do you think of that figure? It sounds like a laughably low figure to try and sort this problem out.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about how many prisons there are, that's probably that's a lot less than £1 million per prison. Yeah, I mean, this is going on all over the country. There's another case which I can't go into too many details about, but a guy who was in prison, having been charged with a murder, has now been charged with committing another murder in prison,
Hmm.
um, in another part of the country. Um, so I don't know which trial he'll face first, but yeah, there's a lot of dangerous people behind bars, and it must be incredibly difficult monitoring them and trying to, because I think, am I right in reading? I think it might have been a previous attack on Watkins, but he was apparently attacked with a sharpened toilet brush.
Yep,
Um,
I did
so
read that as well. Yeah.
that was not that was the previous one. So I think, in prison, if you want to harm somebody, people find a way. They sharpen a toothbrush or razor blade or whatever. That if they want to do harm, they will find a way, even though they don't have knives on them.
Yeah, no, I'm just reading about I'm just trying to pull up an article. So he was previously stabbed. Let me just see if I can get this article working one. So yeah, this is an article from his previous incident. So lost profit singer Ian Watkins was stabbed in prison with a sharpened toilet brush, and it was over a drug debt. So this was in 2023, I believe. A year ago, it was reported that he was stabbed in prison. Now the details have emerged, revealing the convicted PDF was stabbed with a sharpened toilet brush inside the prison. Um, it's pretty messed up. I mean, I didn't know this. This is actually crazy. So somebody's actually written a book called Inside Wakefield Prison: Life Behind Bars and in the Monster Mansion. That's what they've called it.
Yeah.
And so they revealed that Ian Watkins was stabbed over a £900 drug debt, and he had apparently spent thousands of pounds on protection while in prison because he's so despised by his fellow inmates. And it said that a passage from this book said the recent stabbing was a reminder that he needs to pay. He took an amount of spice, which obviously is a synthetic, in synthetic type of smokable that goes around in prison. It's very bad for you. So he'd
Mm.
taken a parcel of spice worth £150, but because it was Watkins, the guy told him that he owed him 900 for it. So really, he was kind of getting extorted in there. Apparently, he was high during the first altercation. He refused to pay, and then he was stabbed in his side using a sharpened toilet brush. Another prisoner told the authors he's hated by many but as H&P Wakefield is mixed, i.e. VPs and high-level gangsters, drug importers, and organized crime, they just take money off him for his safety. So he was really getting extorted for protection in there, and it says that at this time he'd served more than 10 years of his prison sentence so far. He was eligible for parole in 2031, but he had an incident. I didn't know this. There was an incident of him apparently hiding a phone in his back passage, I'll say, back in 2019, and that ended up adding more time to his sentence, which I didn't know that either. That's crazy. They really hid a phone inside himself. That's what it says. That's actually
Yeah,
wild.
well, I mean, I did an article recently about mobile phones in prison on my Substack, and there is these, I can't remember the name of them, these tiny little phones, which
Or Vanco phones. Yeah, I've seen those.
Zanko, yeah, and there was a gang who were flying them into, using drones to bring them in.
Mm.
So maybe, let's hope, maybe Watkins has stuck one of them up his bum.
Yeah, I mean he's a freaky guy. You never know. He might have got the whole iPhone up there. But it says here what's really crazy. It said so yeah, it said during this trial this week, it's revealed he hid the phone inside himself. He argued that two of his fellow inmates forced him to hold the phone as a means of contacting women who sent him fan mail and asking them for money. Watkins even had the nerve to tell jurors you would not want to mess with his fellow inmates at HM Wakefield, calling them mass murderers, R-words, PDFs, and serial killers, the worst of the worst. And then it says, even in this article, it says, really, has he even looked in the mirror lately? But, clearly he was in there getting extorted. They were applying pressure. And I think what's really interesting just reading about HMP Wakefield is they really had, serious gangsters, serial killers, murderers all mixed in there with the PDFs. And clearly that whole situation was just a boiling pot that clearly has boiled over numerous
Yeah,
times now.
I think from memory they've got a special unit for like you say, the worst of the worst, where because often if somebody's they're doing life in prison, they might have a whole life tariff. They got nothing to lose, so they might just be attacking people left, right, and centre. And I think they have a Wakefield, a special unit for these people. I mean, I think I'm right in thinking that Charles Bronson, probably
Yeah.
Britain's most famous prisoner, was held at Wakefield in that sort of segregation unit for a while, because obviously he was so difficult, hard to handle. They didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah, no, he was a menace. I remember seeing the film about him. He used to oil himself up and get naked and fight the guards and stuff. I mean, he was wild as hell.
Mm.
But yeah, he's he's an infamous prisoner. He's definitely had a lot of issues. So it wouldn't surprise me that they'd sent him to one of these kind of these troubled facilities. But yeah, the Ian Watkins situation, he's not really somebody that's going to be missed. I do think it's wrong to kind of rely on this street justice and all that. I don't know whether you call it street justice, but realistically, he should have fought the faced the sentence that he was dealt. And it is unfortunate that, I don't know if you can say it's unfortunate. A lot of people are happy that he's passed away, but his crimes were pretty heinous, and yeah, I don't think anybody can really support that.